Welcome to Sip and Strip, the podcast where we explore the nuances of desire and unravel the intricacies of pleasure, all while enjoying a glass of your favorite wine. Join us on a journey where we dive into the world of sexual exploration and embrace the beauty of conscious intimacy. And here are your hosts, wine communicator Natalia Suter and sex and intimacy coach Melanie Knight.
Is because that mostly in life there is no consent.
Mm-hmm.
People do not ask for consent for anything. When you're talking about consent, we very often don't ask the question, who is it for? So one of the problems is very often with boundaries is that we often say yes to things without actually knowing what we're saying yes to.
I'm really excited about today's episode because I feel like it could be a life-changing for me, possibly. We're going to be talking about consent and boundaries. I'm sure many other women out there listening, and myself included, we've had situations when we've said yes to something that we didn't really want, or we allowed our partners to do something that we didn't, and then we kind of sort of regretted that later on. So I feel like today, learning about boundaries, how to set them, how to talk about them, it will be really, really useful and as I said, life-changing, as probably most of the episodes we've done so far anyway.
Yeah.
let's be honest. So I think I want to start with this question to set the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Why is consent important in sex?
Well, it's interesting you put the word in sex because I think it's important in general life, but especially in sex. And people who do consent training with me do report that it has life-changing impacts on not just their sex life, but actually the whole of their life.
Yes.
Like one client of mine reported to me that she now stands up to her boss at work.
Oh, yes.
In a way that she never did. And so, the consent and boundaries is life-changing and especially important in an intimate or sexual relationship. And in fact, that's even more so because if you think about it, when you're aroused or in a sexual environment, you often will override boundaries more so than in a non-charged environment. So it can be our minds are clouded, or whatever phrase you want to use, that when we're in an aroused state, we are not thinking clearly.
Yes.
And so a lot of these techniques I teach, actually we start to teach in a non-sexual way. So we might use touch, but we might use touch on the safe parts of the body, so non-arousal parts of the body, so that you can learn to be able to voice boundaries and consent without that sexual charge, and then you start
which is harder, as you said,
into a sexual
that makes sense. Once you know how to set boundaries, you know how to set boundaries in general, not just limited to your bedroom. So it could be very beneficial overall.
It's beneficial in every area of life, I think, with family, with friends. I know I used to not speak up with family and friends, and who would friend who would turn up late all the time and I'd never say anything, even though it really upset me. Those sorts of things where we override in life, And so this is a huge subject. So I teach, it's probably worth saying at this point, I teach a type of consent called the wheel of consent, which is quite famous in the consent world. It was invented by a woman called Betty Martin, and she's recently released a book, which you could probably put as a link. And it's called The Art of Receiving and Giving. So when we talk about consent, there's multiple levels to consent. And she does something, she describes it as a wheel.
Okay.
And there is 4 quadrants to the wheel. One is take, and one is allow, and one is effectively, she calls it something slightly different, giving and receiving. She calls them serve and accept in the wheel, but it doesn't really matter what the labels are.
Serve and accept.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is something we often don't think about when we're talking about consent. And if you think about take, for instance, you've probably never heard this in terms of consent. So
no, because when you talk about consent and boundaries, it's more like creating limits and building walls around you, so people don't impose things on you rather than you taking it, which I
love what you've just said there, because I think that's probably quite common in the sense of we potentially perceive boundaries as a way to protect ourselves.
Yes.
But this is not what we're talking about here.
Oh, wow.
There is a reason I think we think about it that way, is because that mostly in life there is no consent. People do not ask for consent for anything. And so we live in a world where people are very often taking from us and not asking to take.
Yes.
They may give to us all the time, like the auntie who wants to give you, I don't know, cakes all the time, but you don't want that because you are on a diet or whatever. The parent who always wants your attention and wants you to help them all the time. So in life, we're bombarded with people who are, wanting things from us, but there is no consent.
Right.
Very often, there may be expectations, there may be things you feel you should do, you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
And that's not true consent. When we're talking about true consent, we're talking about an authentic consent. And I often use, when I talk about authentic consent, I will be meaning the body.
How do you mean the body? Does it have to do with the body language?
Yeah, sort of, yes. Yeah, body language, body wisdom, however you like to look at it.
Gut reaction.
Yeah, They consider the gut to be the second brain.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So very often certainly in our Western society, we are taught that our brains are the king of everything. Our head is the king of everything. But it's not. It wasn't designed to be like that. Our brains are analytical. They're designed to process different scenarios, but they weren't designed to come up with the final answer.
Yes.
Which is why people will often go around evaluating things all of the time. I could do this, I could do that, I should do this, I shouldn't do that. That's the brain just constantly evaluating. Our bodies.
And not finding the answer and freaking out and evaluating even more. Yeah.
Now, I think our bodies are probably the most authentic, although other people would say it's also about the mind-body connection, so bringing the two together to form an answer between them. But I also think the body is possibly the most authentic, because our bodies are very now phenomenon. Phenomenal, can't even say that word. So if you eat something that you didn't like, your body knows it.
Yes.
You'll be like, oh, that was horrible. Or,
Sooner
or
than
my
you do.
stomach didn't really like that. It feels heavy on my stomach. Or if you go to hug, if that auntie wants a hug from you, and you go and hug them because you feel you should, but your body is like, oh, that was horrible.
Yeah.
Our body knows. Our body knows what it does and doesn't want.
Yeah. It knows, oftentimes it knows sooner than we do. Or sometimes we don't know at all, because again, there is that disconnection, right? We don't really trust our bodies that much, and we think with the brain, like, go into over-analysing.
And because we don't trust our bodies, we often override our bodies. We often override our bodies with all the things that we think we should be doing. So if we're with our husband, our partner, and they want sex, and we're thinking, well, I put him off last week and the week before, and so I really should do it. So I should do this time, but you know deep down your body doesn't want it. But you go along with it because you feel you should.
So will you always feel it in your body?
It's difficult to say, will you always, because, you know, I'm not an expert on your body, you're not an expert on mine, and nobody knows in reality. But what I would say is that when we start to learn to listen to our bodies, they very often have wisdom. They have a knowing that when we listen to it, that we wouldn't have known without listening to them. Does that make sense?
I think it does, yeah. Is it as simple as, let's say, I'm talking to my partner and he proposes something, and there is something in my body, a twitch in my body, and, you know, listening to that kind of thing?
Yeah, so when we do exercises, and we could maybe even do a little example on here if you wanted to, what we might practice with is I ask you a question that you would want to answer no to. And then you would notice, what does your body do when there's a no there in your body? And then I might ask a question, what is a yes, that might elicit a yes answer, and then vice versa. So you start to notice first of all, it's noticing. We very often don't even notice what our bodies are doing.
Would it be as simple as imagining different scenarios and trying to see how your body responds to it?
Yeah, you can do something like that. I mean, it's your body, as I said, is a now phenomenon. But if you bring back a memory or a time where you've done that thing, then your body is reacting to that memory as if it was happening now. So you can use that information of the way your body is reacting now to ascertain, would that have been a yes or a no? Or what was that experience? You can elicit more than yeses or nos from your body, but that is one of the skills we teach. But it also could be, you know, just noticing, okay, might not be a straight no, it might be a maybe.
Yes.
It might be a maybe. I would do this in this circumstance. And then the voicing it would be potentially there's a negotiation to have.
Okay. Which brings us on to the second bit, which is voicing, because obviously to negotiate, you first have to voice what you want and what you don't want. For me, again, the first thing that would stop me from voicing what I want or do not want would be the fear of rejection. Or thinking like someone's going to think, are you crazy? Why do you want this weird thing? Whatever that is.
Yeah, so, I mean, one of the things I suggest with couples is to do this game called the 3-minute game. But there is a foundation, there does need to be a foundation of both parties in that. Knowing that they can say no. And learning that it's okay to be with a no, that it's not a rejection. It's just a no in that moment. And that can be a big one, as we were talking about in the previous episodes of the rejection piece, is learning to be okay with a no.
I don't know if that's too big of a question, but how do you learn that? Because let's say you have a need, and then your partner says no to that, and you feel deep inside again, maybe in your body, like, I really do need this, and he's saying no. So is it a match? Can we work it out? Should we separate?
Yeah, I mean, these are huge questions, and they do come up in this kind of work when you're working, especially with couples and consent and boundaries. I would say again, it comes down to communication, but I think it would also depend on, is this a no forever? I had partners who I was into BDSM, and they were like, okay, this is not for me. Never, ever will I be wanting to play out a BDSM scenario. In that scenario, what's nice about consent is you then know. Very often we stay in relationships hoping that the person will change or we can change them to fulfill the thing that we think we need or we want. Now, maybe bad news when you get it, but then you know, and you don't necessarily waste 10 years of your life because you're staying in a relationship that was never going to fulfill you in the way you wanted it to. Now, there are couples that come and do this kind of work that do end up splitting up because of things like this.
Yes, which they in a way should have split up 5 years ago.
Potentially, yeah, and it depends on the scenario, right? But the realisation can be, and I did this with my partner. I started doing a lot of tantra. He was a no to it, and he said to me, no, I'm never going to be interested. I did have him come to one workshop, and then he said, never again. And so it was heartbreaking at the time because I loved him dearly. I really did. But I also realised that I had my answer.
Yes.
He was never going to be the person I wanted him to be. So I had a choice. I stay in that relationship and accept that he would never be that person I wanted him to be. Yeah. Or I choose to move on, and I chose to move on and found a fabulous partner who is what I really wanted deep down.
Yeah. So instead of fooling yourself, just
this is about authenticity. This is about being real. If we're not honest with ourselves and with our partners, and I think I said it in one of the previous episodes, if we lie back and complain in our heads, that they're not what we want, which we often do as women. We don't voice things, and we think they should be mind readers, and they're not. So, but then we can waste years of our life in that resentment and upset. When actually a fairly simple conversation, which is one of these things that's simple but not simple, right? It's not. It can be a very difficult conversation to have.
So that's another benefit of having the answer right here, right now, which essentially brings you closer to what you need. As you said, you knew that the ex-partner, he wasn't into tantric sex, so you could close that chapter, so to speak, and then move on and find the partner that you've got now, rather than, as we said, wasting time.
And it might not be that drastic. That was one example. It might be that actually in those communications you find out your partner would be interested in trying new things or trying what you're wanting to suggest. So it can, I suppose the word is make or break a relationship. It can, but what was happening very often before that was two people putting up with something that they weren't very happy with in the first place. And that is quite common in relationships, that both parties are not happy and not satisfied and don't understand why not. But they don't understand why not because they're not talking about it and they're not asking for what they want.
So if it's a no forever, it is likely that the relationship won't survive.
Well, that's a difficult one. That's for up to the people involved. Some people may be, well, actually, that wasn't that important to me and I can live without it. For me, I'd realised that tantric sex was going to be my way of life. I was, I'd found something that lit me up, made me feel beautiful, whole, sexy. There was no way I was going to give that up. But if it's, I don't know, I want to go and do tango with you, and he says no, never. Could you live with that? You might be able to live with that.
Yeah, it's about giving up on your needs.
And it depends on what you feel is I would say there are some what you might call fundamental needs. And it depends on what you feel is a fundamental thing for you. What is it that makes or breaks a relationship? What are you willing to live with? I'm a big believer in wanting to have, wanting people to have the relationship of their dreams, because I know it's possible.
Yes.
But many people are like, well, I love him, and I think I can live with this.
Settling.
And there may be an element of settling, and there may be, if they've done some work like this, it may be more of what I would say a conscious choice.
Oh, right, yes.
But a lot of people are settling, and I know I settled in a lot of relationships for things that weren't working. I didn't deal with them. I didn't voice the upset. I didn't ask for something new. Or when I asked for something new, it was an anger, upset, frustrated. Why are you not doing this? You said you would do it, and all that sort of stuff, which doesn't help.
Is there such a thing as too soon when it comes to talking about boundaries and consent? Let's say there is a couple, they've just started dating.
I don't think anything is too soon. This is a... Now, would you want to talk about the nuances of what you might do in bed together? Maybe not. I don't know. It depends on the person. They might end up in bed quite quickly, and so you might want to talk about your sexual preferences. But as we said at the beginning of this session, was that consent is not just about sex. Very often we will start dating someone and we'll overlook things that we want, like, oh, I want children, but I don't want to scare him off too soon, so let's not ask about that. Or putting on the pretense of the perfect woman or the perfect man, so that the other person doesn't think bad of us, versus actually having in-depth conversations about, what are your values? What do you want from life? Those are boundaries and consent. They're actually like, what do we have similar wants and desires in life? And again, we're very often, because our society, we've been told this fairy tale. Man meets woman, they fall in love, live happily ever after.
Yes.
And the thing is, the problem is with that is we think we've fallen in love, and then we overlook all the things that really are not working and that we could have caught early on in a relationship, because we actually very often know deep down, but we don't address it, and we overlook it and think, it'll be fine, he'll change.
That's the thinking. He will change for me.
I think people don't change really unless they're seriously at work on themselves. So what I mean by that is they're doing some sort of personal development, they're doing counselling, therapy, coaching. And even then you can go and do those things and still not really change. You have to have a deep down desire to want to learn and adapt and change. However you express it, it doesn't really matter. But I think there is a type of person. Both, again, I'm really, really grateful for my partner, who is we're both very similar in that sense. We both love to look at in our lives, what's the next thing we're working on, what's the next thing that's holding us back, and it's not a typical relationship.
No, it's not. It always keeps you on your toes in a way, right? Because you sort it out one problem, okay, what's next? It's always challenging.
And it's not even about problems. We have the ability, like if you're looking at it from a spiritual point of view, we don't know the capability of what is available for human beings. We don't. We use a fraction of our brain space. We have energies running through us that can do things to our bodies that change us. Our brain capacity can change. We don't know what's possible. We really don't. And through things like, and this is going a bit off topic really, but things like meditation, yoga, coaching, transformation, we can become bigger, higher versions of ourselves than we ever thought possible. And that's a never-ending game. That's not about problems. That's about who is the highest expression of what I could be as a human being on this planet. So that is incredible to be inquiring into and practicing.
So you and your partner are in this relationship where you support each other to be the highest, the best version of yourself. That's really sweet.
Thank you. But as I said, we've gone off the topic of consent.
That's all right. That's a good break though, because I'll introduce the wine very quickly before we move on and continue. What we're drinking today is Pinot Noir. A reason why I decided to pair the topic of consent and boundaries with Pinot Noir. One thing is vulnerability, because Pinot Noir as a grape is a very, very sensitive grape to the environment. You have to be very good at handling the grape so that it strikes the right balance between the sugar and acidity. It doesn't get overripe. So it needs careful handling to reach the potential to strike the right balance. And I thought, when I was preparing for this episode, consent and boundaries, I was thinking that it has a lot of similarities in that sense that it's a sensitive topic. It requires careful handling. A lot of vulnerability is involved in this, talking about your boundaries and about your consent. So in that way, and you have to be very vigilant when dealing with this. So in that sense, I thought they're quite similar. And then again, Pinot Noir is a grape that evolves over time. It's known for aging quite well. So with time, it's going to improve over time, become more complex, develop tertiary aromas that develop with aging, things like mushroom, forest flower, etc. And then again, consent and boundaries, evolution over time, they change. In that way, they're quite similar, Pinot Noir and consent and boundaries. So that's why I thought I will choose this wine. And this one is, this Pinot Noir is from Chile, from the wine estate called Errázuriz, which was founded in 1870 by Don Maximiano Errázuriz. And he's the guy who planted the first French grapes in the Aconcagua Valley in Chile, so kind of pioneering certain techniques there. Critically acclaimed, winemaker of the year 2018, top 10 world's most admired wine brands by Drink International. And in general, when people think about Pinot Noir, they think about Burgundy, which is the home of Pinot Noir, which is cool continental climate. So sometimes people could be surprised how come Pinot Noir can grow in Chile, which is warm Mediterranean climate. And it's possible, again, because of the altitude, which is what we had with Malbec. I don't know if you remember, grown at really high altitude. So warm climate, but planted really high. So with those cooling influences. So that's why the grape gets warm days but really cool nights, and it can grow and ripen quite reliably, and that's why it can thrive. Pinot Noir can thrive in Chile, which otherwise it wouldn't be possible. And this wine, I think I picked it up in Tesco, but it's also available in Waitrose and Majestic Wines. What do you think about the wine?
I'm really liking it now. I wasn't sure at the beginning, but it's really light.
It is very light, light body.
Yeah.
Very different to the Cabernet Sauvignon we had in the last episode. Very light, high acidity, quite delicate. I get a lot of delicate fruits.
It feels like a white wine because it's that lightness of a white wine compared to a red
with the
wine.
high acidity. And it's a lot of delicate fruits as opposed to what we had last time. This is more like strawberry, raspberry, but also a bit of get a bit of that mushroom maybe, and a bit of like
I wouldn't have noticed
things.
mushroom unless you'd said it, but
Earthy stuff, because it's not just fruit.
Mm.
It's not just like strawberry and all.
No, that I can tell there's a bit of an aftertaste, the earthy aftertaste.
So now let's go back to consent and boundaries. I feel like I've already asked most of the questions.
Can I bring back to a point we started with earlier?
Yes, please.
So I talked to you about take, allow.
Oh yes, the wheel of consent.
Take, allow, serve and accept, or giving and receiving. Now this is a big part of the work we teach people, because when you're talking about consent, we very often don't ask the question, who is it for?
How do you mean?
So if I was to get offered to give you a massage,
you offer me a massage.
yeah, who is it for?
I could be swayed either way. It's for both. I mean, in fairness, it's for both of us, because you're giving me a massage, but you can be taking pleasure from it.
You notice something that many people don't notice, which is great. So yeah, very often people would think, okay, I'm giving a massage.
Yeah.
Which is great. But what we often don't say when we say the word giving is it's actually generally for the other person. Now, it doesn't mean to say that we can't gain pleasure from it, but it would be very often giving to the other person. So if I'm offering you a massage, I'm giving you the gift. So I'm giving you the gift of my time and my massage skills to give you a massage, right? Might get pleasure out of it, but actually I'm doing the something that's giving you a service. If you were to go to a massage place, you would be paying for a service. Now, we often don't think of it like this, and it can often get very grey in relationships, like, you know, well, I want a massage, but I don't know whether I can ask for it. He doesn't like giving me massage. He might not enjoy it. All those sorts of questions come up. There's also another way to think about giving a massage. What happens if I was on a massage training course and I wanted to give you a massage, but it was in order to practice being a massage therapist?
Who is it for starts shifting a little bit, right?
It does.
Because I can get pleasure from it, but you've got some sort of agenda behind it. So it's for both of us, maybe even more from you than for me. And again, if you're in a relationship, the boundaries can get muddied. But again, what Betty Martin often talks about is trying to divide them up so that they're really clear, so that you can practice. What is it like to purely give to someone 100%? What is it like to receive 100%? Not having, and again, receiving is something we don't ever very often do 100%. We often think there's some agenda behind it, like I can't receive because he's going to want something back, or I'm not good at receiving, I can't feel it, I'm not, whatever, right? So we're not very good at receiving. We're not very often good at giving 100%, because very often when we give, we expect something in return. Yes, there is a tiny tally going on, like I gave you one, so you owe me one, and all that stuff.
And the situation I was talking before about me giving a massage for my benefit would be under what we would call the take scenario. So I'm giving you something, but I'm giving it for my pleasure, not for you.
So I now need to consent to take it, so you can.
Well, you would now need to consent to allowing me to practice on you.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So this, I can see how that could be really muddy and chaotic, because I feel like a lot of people are really good, maybe subconsciously, maybe not, are disguising it in a way like I want to give you a massage, but actually deep down it's for me.
Yeah.
So it can really get very chaotic as to understand like who's actually giving, who's receiving, who's taking, who's allowing. And all this tally going on, like you know,
I love the thing that you talk about with the tally, because I was so bad at that in my previous relationship. My partner always wanted a massage. I would never get one back, so of course I was always tallying up how many times am I going to give a massage before I get one back, and I'd be giving a massage resentfully because I'd be like, I'm bored now. When's my turn?
So in a situation like this, what would you recommend? How can you avoid this kind of tally war? I'm giving you, so you owe me, and is there a way to get out of the muddy waters?
Yeah, so the teaching we do through Betty Martin's training, we use tools like she's got this game called the 3-minute game.
Oh yes, you did mention.
Which you can practice doing the 2 forms, the giving and receiving and the taking and allowing, and you ask for what you want. And then the partner that you're with can say yes or no, and maybe they'll talk about boundaries. And then you do that action for 3 minutes. So one of the problem is very often with boundaries is that we often say yes to things without actually knowing what we're saying yes to. So when my partner wanted me to massage him, my ex-partner, I'd never say, okay, I'm willing to give you a massage, but only for 10 minutes, because I know my hands will get tired and I'll get bored.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a limit. Like expressing, and I never did that. So I'd sit there after 10 minutes, I'd be doing, I'm bored now, but he still wants more, and I can't say no now, and you know, we don't put limits and boundaries on things.
Because I think we project what we think onto the other person. So my perception, when he was asking you for a massage, in your head, it was a 10-minute quick massage.
Yeah.
In his head, it was 2-hour massage all my body. So you projected onto him what you thought, he projected onto you what he thought, and neither of you thought to
neither of you are talking about it, and both of you resenting it, because neither of you are getting what you want. You're assuming.
It's easy to fall into this trap, because you
very,
just
very
assume
easy.
what's in your head. So you sign that contract, the other person assumes what's in their head, they sign the contract, that's it, done, without talking exactly. It could be the time, it could be the format, the place, so many different things.
It could be how, you know, what kind of pressure, what kind of touch do you want, where do you want it, how do you want it. We don't ask these questions. You know, very often we override things like, oh, my back's hurting, but I promised I'd do this. Rather than saying either at the beginning or partway through, okay, my back's hurting, or I don't want to wreck my back, so I'm not going to do this part, but I'll do this part.
So kind of giving up on your own needs to please the other person. And I don't know if we've mentioned this, possibly the fear because for me it will be the fear of rejection or people pleasing, or the partner pleasing thing. Feeling that if I say no, you know, I may lose him, or he may, you know, look for someone else. I don't know, all those negative thoughts playing out in your head.
But again, that comes back to assumptions, because you're thinking all that sort of stuff, but you've no idea what he's thinking.
Yes, that's true.
And very often it's not the same for your partner. You may be thinking, oh, will reject me. He might be like, oh my God, that's amazing if she did that, or whatever. Or, or I'd love her to be more this way, or whatever. You've no idea what he's thinking. And it comes back to also, if you've got consent and you've got an answer, you know, you've got there's a safety in this, in containers, like when you when you know the boundaries, you know the limits, you have, in some respects, more freedom to play. Does that make sense? Because you have that safety of knowing, he's not going to leave me because I want to do this, because I know he's said yes, and I know it's an authentic yes.
Yes, which is the important part.
Yeah, and it has to come from both sides as well, knowing that your partner is authentic with what they say as well. But when you've got that, oh my God, this is something we both want to do, let's go and play, then you're both able to express that and enjoy that so much more fully than if you're in your head thinking, oh, I don't know about this, I can't do this because he might leave me and stuff like that, that's holding you back. It is weird because in some respects, logically, if you were to create boundaries, and I'm not talking about the protective boundaries, I'm talking about what is it authentically you want in that moment. This is a moment by moment thing. And by the way, it's not generally, I don't want this off the table forever. And it might be. I mean, I talked about in the previous episode about deep throating. For me, I probably never will try deep throating again. I might, but that may be something for me that's a hard no, I'll never do it again. But for most of us, if you're really living this consensual life connected to your body, then your body is a moment by moment thing. If you think about your life, right, especially as women, we've got our cycles. What we want today will not be what we want when we're premenstrual or when we're on a period. It's not, very often we can change, within a half an hour. Okay, something bad happened at work, so suddenly all you want to do is go and eat that ice cream and go to bed. So we think the boundaries are, oh, I've got to, communicate all my boundaries and they're never going to change again. No, it's actually, this is why it's a communication thing. It's actually the ability to say, moment by moment, do you want something? And then have the freedom to be able to say no. If you're partway through lovemaking and not enjoying it, can you say no? And can you say, and can your partner, whether it be man or woman, be able to be okay with, right, this is a no right now. Maybe you need a cuddle instead, or you need, I was like this morning. I cried over something and all I needed was a hug. And I asked my partner to stop and give me a hug.
It takes the understanding from the other side because, as you say, it can change from moment to moment. If we go into this thinking that you said yes 2 days ago or 2 months ago, it's fixed now. The partner could be like, oh, what's wrong with her now? She said yes 2 months ago. She doesn't want it now. Maybe I did something. You go into overthinking. She found someone else. All that stuff. If you fall into that trap of fixed mind, of thinking that all the consent and boundaries are fixed forever for a very long time, then you just really confused when someone says something else.
And it can feel like a rejection because. But then it can also, and it's the same for women as well. When we see like a man, like, oh, he normally likes it this way, why is he not doing that? And then realize, but then we're seeing him in the same way, like, oh, he's a fixed machine that just does it this way. But he's not. Men like things, it comes from, and we talked about this in the previous session, like it's both of us have responsibility for actually not allowing our fears of rejection and fears of whatever to get in the way of being able to just communicate. And again, this is easier said than done, and that's why people come to people like me, because it is something that is easier to practice with someone else who's neutral. so that you can learn these skills, because in an environment with your partner where there is a potential for fear of rejection and all that sort of stuff, it can be highly charged. And we're so also concerned because feeling rejected and things like that can feel so deep down emotional that we will do anything to avoid that. And the problem is, that's the very problem, the reason that we get held back. Is because we're so busy avoiding something that may or may never happen.
Exactly, worrying about, what's in our head.
And we're protecting ourselves, we're protecting our heart. And in doing that, though, we create barriers between us and the other person, because we're not expressing who we are. We're protecting ourselves. We've got this shield, armour, whatever you want to call it, against people hurting us. So, but the problem is our partners know that, even if we've never expressed it, they like feel that distance.
The distance, and it also stops us from connecting effectively.
So a lot of this has to do with us being willing to be okay that we might get hurt. Be okay that we might get rejected. We're not going to die.
No,
rejected.
This is irrational fear.
These are irrational fears, and I'm glad you brought that up. I don't know whether I said this on a previous episode, but it's amazing how our biology hasn't changed from thousands of years. Like our bodies react to things like that as if we were about to experience an actual threat of life. So being chased by a tiger. Our bodies react in the same way. So it feels like life or death.
A real thing, yes. That you're gonna,
And it really does. Like, you know, the thought of being hurt or rejected or something like that really feels like a death. And so we avoid it, we protect it. But it's not. It's not the same, but our bodies are reacting the same way. And the only problem is that then creates barriers between us and our partners. So doing work on consent and starting to learn to be okay with yeses and nos, notice your own yeses and nos, be able to voice them, creates this foundation of safety, of being able to talk to your partner authentically, and to start to let some of those barriers drop, because you have got that level of communication and you have got that ability to say moment to moment, I want something or I don't want something, and if you're doing something that's not oh my God, yes, this is incredibly amazing, then you need to start to question why. Why am I doing this? Now, it might be that you've chosen to do it because your partner wants you to do it, and you've said, yes, I can be okay with that because he wants it. Nothing wrong with that. But most of us are doing stuff day to day, every day, that is not, oh my God, this is amazing, I want to do it.
Yes, I agree. Okay.
And that's what boundaries and consent allows, when you're able to say, oh my God, yes, I really want my neck touched. Would you touch my neck just like this in the way I really want it? Oh my God, that's amazing. Now, what would you like?
Oh God, okay. How simple as that?
It's simple, and it's not simple.
I know, yeah.
So it's, you know, that's one of the things that the 3-minute game, which you can find on Betty Martin, you can find videos, instructions on Betty Martin's site, or you can come and explore it with someone like me, but gives you the ability to start using touch as a way to explore what would I love to receive in this moment, what would I love to give in this moment, what could I take, what could I allow.
Right. Is setting boundaries in monogamous relationship and in activities such as BDSM, threesomes, play parties, is the latter different, or is pretty much the same thing?
Well, there's similarities and pretty much the same. I would say in BDSM, I was quite heavily involved in the BDSM world for a while. Actually, they knew about consent a long time before it became common.
They kind of had to, didn't they?
Yeah, because if you're thinking about it, if you're doing quite extreme things,
you have to,
and especially if you're sort of a sub, you basically are setting up your dom to do things to you, so that you would be having communications before that to say, this is what I want, this is what this is a hard no, these are things that I might be okay with. So in the BDSM world, it very much was a part of that world for a long time. Threesomes and stuff is an interesting one. I think it's extremely important to have consent in a threesome. I was involved in a threesome. I've been involved in a few threesomes, but the one that comes to mind was pretty horrendous.
Oh, because
there was no consent. They were my ex-partner now, basically said we'd had an agreement that he was seeing another woman, and that was fine. It was an open relationship. And that he wanted to have a threesome between me, her, and him. So he set it up, but there was no actual talking of what we would do in the threesome itself. I know so much more now than I did then. So she turned up.
I'm laughing, but I would probably do the same.
She turned up, we had a couple of drinks. He then threw her and me into a room and said, go and play for a bit. Which we did for a little bit, and then after about an hour, he came in and took her and said, I'm taking her to my bedroom and we're now going to play. And then she left. And I was like, this is not my definition of a threesome.
Oh my God.
But we hadn't talked about it. We hadn't, talking about assumptions. He had a vision of what in his head.
And you had a vision
and I had a vision in my head of what a threesome was. And it was no way. And I was really, really upset and felt very rejected and upset by that.
Oh my God, yeah.
I see. But when you're talking about threesomes and multiple people, then consent becomes a bit more complicated, because of course you've got to take into consent of all people involved. So it is, I would say, probably even more important, because otherwise it's so easy, I think, in those sorts of situations with multiple people, where someone or some people will feel left out or not satisfied, or somehow not wanting it or whatever. So I think that it's hugely important to have a foundation of consent, and knowing that you can change that consent at whatever point throughout that scenario.
So my next question was, you've already answered it, about the regular check-ins, which you've said that it changes from moment to moment, and it's fine. Yeah,
it's completely fine. I mean, it might be as simple as I want to be on top right now. Okay. It might be as simple as I want to cuddle, or I want I want you to be inside me. Those sorts of things are sort of voicing consent. They're sort of saying, this is what I want. And, the other person then has an opportunity to say, no, it's not what I want right now. I want to cuddle. I don't want you inside me, or whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
It takes two people being able to be okay with no.
Yes. I think that's a key here.
It's really key.
With a no.
And there have been moments in my relationship with my current partner where I've overridden that, where I've been like, I'm tired now, I just want to turn over and go to sleep, or I'm not enjoying it, it's hurting a little bit, but just suffering through it a little bit and not saying anything.
Yeah.
Like, love making is about love, and it could be, it can include movement, it can include breath, it could include different sex positions, it can include include different toys, or water, or having a bath together, or making love is endless, but it also means endlessly almost talking about it. Now I've got to the point with my partner where we don't necessarily talk all the time, but we can have that sort of communication
because you understand,
because we've got body language, and we know that we trust each other to the point where if we don't want something, I can say something, or we can change, or I change something up, and it all works. But you have to have that foundation of complete authenticity and consent and boundaries.
Yeah, and it starts with authentic communication. And if you don't say those things or don't speak up, it builds up into like a resentment, doesn't it? And with time you don't say those things, and you can either explode at some point or completely even imagine things that are not even there.
It's very easy also to, we're talking about rejection. It's almost it's easy to feel not wanted because your partner hasn't done something quite right, but they didn't know necessarily, or they stopped because they were tired, but they left you feeling rejected. And so it can be fraught with upsets unless you're both able to talk about things.
Yeah, communication is the key. And I loved what you said before, being okay with a no. I do remember listening to a TED talk many years ago where you can actually get used to rejection. I think your body gets used to rejection. There was a guy who did like this experiment for 100 days. Every day he was asking for something he knew people will say no to, like approaching a person on the street, can you give me £100? No.
Yeah.
And it was hurtful, but after 100 days he was just so used to it.
I've done exercises like that.
Oh yes?
Yeah, and it's sales techniques can be quite like that as well. If you're learning to sell something, then going out and trying to sell something and just allow yourself to get rejected, or like you say, just go to someone. And again, I was talking about it in the exercises I do, where we would practice experiencing a no. So I would say a question
where
I know you would say no, and we could repeat that multiple times until you're in different ways and different ways to do it, until you get to be able to be okay in your body with a no.
Yes.
A relationship, again, we think about this transactional thing, which is I can't upset them because they might upset me, like this whole thing of I've got to keep him happy, he's got to keep me happy. It's a transactional thing. Whereas actually keeping in mind that the two of you are together, assuming you are in a love relationship, obviously not everyone is, but very often we come together in a relationship because there is very often a foundation of love. That you're knowing that person deep down loves you, that they may upset you at some point. It's going to happen. It's going to happen that you're not going to meet his standards, and he's not going to meet yours at some point. Your relationship can be stronger than that because of your love for each other. And at some point it will even out, because at some point you'll do something he doesn't like, he'll do something you don't like. And our ability to be able to be okay with that and just move on. It's not a problem.
Like, we're two human beings, so obviously we're not perfect.
And we are different. We have different needs, and some point your need might not be met. It probably will at some point in the relationship. Now, if it's never going to be met, we talked about that earlier. If it's never going to be met, you might want to evaluate, is this the relationship for you? Mostly in a relationship, it's more about, he said no right now. It might be his exhausted. He's been at work all day,
Yes.
and he's just not able to fulfill that right now.
It's not a no forever. It's
Yeah.
right now in this situation, this moment, to that particular thing and in that particular place. Yeah. Okay. Good. I got used to now learning a lot from you. So thank you again for
You're
your
welcome.
time.
I've loved it.
I loved it too. It was great. It's really, really great. Thank you so much. To everyone listening, we will see you here in a couple of weeks. Bye for now.